All prospective population studies to date on ultra-processed food consumption and weight gain have found that the more ultra-processed foods people eat, the more likely they are to become overweight or obese. Why might that be the case? One of the reasons people tend to overconsume ultra-processed foods more than less processed foods may be a change in texture. If you feed people a so-called soft rice salad made with creamy risotto rice and boiled vegetables, they end up eating 17% more calories than when given the same salad made with regular rice and raw vegetables. Even just swapping a hard hamburger bun for a soft one can make a difference. However, this is the opposite of what big food tends to dish out for us. The food industry processes products for maximum consumption rate. They don't call it fast food for nothing. As opposed to those made in a factory, foods that grow tend to be slow. Thanks in part to the fiber content of whole healthy plant foods, the default eating rate of more healthful foods just tends to be slower naturally. Though there are certainly exceptions, like caramel toffee, highly processed foods tend to be consumed quicker. There can be a 100-fold difference in consumption between the fastest and slowest foods. You could consume an entire 2,000 daily calorie allotments worth of chocolate milk in 4 minutes, whereas it would take more than 6 straight hours to chew through that many raw carrots. Based on this particular sampling of 45 foods, though, it doesn't look like ultra-processed foods are consumed any faster than less processed foods, but based on analysis of hundreds of different foods, the average caloric intake rate of ultra-processed foods is about double that of unprocessed foods. But note that's in calories per minute. Maybe that has less to do with eating rate and more to do with how concentrated in calories so many ultra-processed foods are, often packed with added sugar and fat, not to mention salt and flavor enhancers to help trigger compulsive eating. How could we tease out all these factors? In a landmark study, people were assigned in random order a diet composed of either ultra-processed foods or unprocessed foods for 2 weeks. But here's the kicker. The diets were matched for presented calories, carbs, protein, fat, sugar, salt, and fiber. So if the reason people overeat ultra-processed foods is not the degree of processing, but rather their junky nutrient profile, then this should have evened things out. But no, they averaged 500 more calories each day on the ultra-processed diet. So they ate about 500 more calories a day and gained about a pound a week, while those on the unprocessed diet lost about a pound a week, so within 2 weeks there was already a 4-pound difference between the two groups. So despite the ultra-processed and unprocessed diets being matched for daily presented calories, sugar, fat, fiber, and macronutrients, people consumed more calories when exposed to the ultra-processed diet as compared to the unprocessed one. And had the experimental diets allowed for the greater differences in sugar, fat, and salt that you typically see in ultra-processed foods, you can imagine how the weight gain would have been even worse. So limiting consumption of ultra-processed foods may be an effective strategy for obesity prevention and treatment. But since the researchers matched sugar, fat, and salt in the two diets, why did people overeat the ultra-processed foods? It's not because ultra-processed foods were significantly more delicious. The diets were successfully matched for palatability, too. What differed was eating rate. People were consuming calories 50% faster on the ultra-processed diet compared to the unprocessed diet. And we know that the faster we eat, the more calories we tend to take in, presumed to be because our natural satiety mechanisms don't have time to catch up. However, there are 2 other reasons explaining why people gain so much more weight eating the ultra-processed diet, which I'll cover next.